Thanks everybody for being here. So we're in the middle or a third of the way through our training program called Think and Be Productive, and this is a training program for restaurant leaders, more specifically even Papa Murphy's restaurant leaders, since it's kind of designed for that. But pretty much anybody that is in the service industry can probably learn something from this. So we have three parts to this program. Part one, we've already completed, and that is the principles of preparation. Part two is we're starting today is the principles of production, and part three, which is down the road, is the principles of execution. And so the whole idea between this is that part one is all about the planning stage. It's about thinking through things. It's the administration. It's the forecasting. It's the projections. It's the planning out of the weeks, of the days, of the shifts. It's the planning out of the food and the scheduling, that type of thing. So it's really the more of the thinking part of this process. Part two, then, the principles of production, is more about getting things done. It's about ramping up, getting things prepared for usage. And so the principles of production, we're talking about being efficient, being effective, and so on. And part three, then, the principles of execution. This is more of, once we're produced and we've got everything built up, this is the distribution of our product. So once we're all prepped up, locked and loaded, ready to go, this is the execution, more of the front of the house, where we're actually selling, we're engaging with the customers, and we're executing the distribution of the product. So it's the planning, the production, and then the execution. So we're going to start today with the part two, principles of production. Just a quick review of part one, the principles of preparation. That was have a clear vision of your desired outcome. Plan first, produce second, and then benchmarking and finish lines. And those were the three principles of part one. If you have not seen those, you can go to joelsmithcoach.com. We're moving on today. We're starting part two, principles of production. And specifically, we're going to talk about the multitasking myth. Now, if you've worked with me for a while, you've heard me talk about multitasking, but we're going to break it down quite a bit more today, so you can kind of see what this looks like. Next month, we'll talk about handcuffing, which is double teaming. And then the following month, we'll talk about time framing and the 5-second rule, which has nothing to do with food falling on the floor. So, all right, the multitasking myth. Before we get into that, I want to just give you a general idea of the problem with productivity. So in the restaurant industry, productivity is the most volatile expense that we have. Next to food costs, labor and labor costs is our next most expensive, but it is the most volatile. Food costs can fluctuate a little bit, a couple percent here and there, but labor costs can fluctuate a lot. And the reason why is because it really is volatile. You can have a store that really is very efficient and very productive, and then you can have a store that's just really not. And there could be 4 to 5% different from store to store just based on productivity. So we're gonna really tackle that a little bit. So the average worker in the service industry wastes somewhere between 20 to 30% of their time trying to figure out what to do next. And that's mostly in the leadership world, but it's really everybody. A lot of times, on the crew level, they don't do anything unless someone tells them. They don't know how to find their own things to do. They don't know how to move from one task to another until somebody tells them. And so it puts more pressure on the leadership. The leadership, sometimes, if they don't plan well, they're always trying to figure out what to do next instead of having it all planned out ahead of time. And so that's the reason why we started with the with the principles of preparation, because we really have to have those principles of preparation in place, prepare well if we're going to be productive and do that. We waste more time doing tasks out of order, working in a messy environment, or allowing non-relevant chatter to cause us to lose focus. We tend to simply move onto whatever task feels right at the time. We settle into inefficient patterns that depreciate our efficiency. These patterns become bad habits. Bad habits are expensive and frustrating to those trapped in the cycle. And then last of all, with the problems, most leaders in the service industry don't even realize when they're stuck in patterns of inefficiency. They don't even know any better or have their face stuck in the cheese. And we like that term, face stuck in the cheese. One thing I've noticed with really productive people is that really productive people, they're good at seeing the big picture. They know how to zoom out and see the big picture. And they also know how to zoom in and focus on the smaller picture. People struggle with productivity when they don't do either well, or they do one well and not the other. So if you're always a big picture person, you're always seeing the big picture, but you can't zone in and really hone in on something. You might struggle to really stick with something and get it done. If you're honed in and you're really good at focusing on something, but you miss the big picture, you might be doing what you're doing, but you can't see what the next step is, or you just kind of miss the big picture and see that so that's really what we're getting at here. We need to know when to zoom in and when to zoom out, and this presentation should help you with that. So you'll need to be willing to challenge traditional ideas and allow yourself to consider new ideas. Okay, sometimes we need to let go of the seemingly good or familiar ideas to make room for better ones. So some of you, when we start talking about multitasking, some of you might think, yeah, I'm pretty good at multitasking. I don't know what you're talking about, Joel, And I would just say, hang in there and have an open mind and think through this, because there's a lot of people that don't get this, and some people don't necessarily agree right away until they learn it. But trust me, this is not something that's just my idea. This is universal. Everybody, all the big companies that are effective and teach any kind of efficiency knows this. So how we define multitasking. Now, some of you might think of multitasking as being able to do a bunch of things at one time effectively. Well, maybe. We're gonna zone in a little bit more specific with this term, though, and be more focused on this. So the definition I'm going to use is exercising the urge to act on impulse without regard to system or process to keep you focused, resulting in favoring the urge to start new projects over finishing existing projects. So if you think that you're really good at multitasking, the chances are you're not. But what you might be good at is parallel tasking. Parallel tasking is when is a little bit different. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but parallel tasking is when two things are being done at the same time, but it's not necessarily just you. Okay, and so maybe you got a Hobart working for you at the same time. So you got the Hobart mixing some dough for you, and you're putting labels on things, and but that's not multitasking, that's parallel tasking. So we'll get into that. So the problem with multitasking. So multitasking gives the illusion of competence and productivity, but it is a detriment to your productivity. So there's a lot of people that kind of hold their head up high and they think, I'm a good multitasker. I remember years ago in one of our stores, I was in the office when our general manager was interviewing somebody, and I remember the person that was being interviewed really kind of chimed up and says, "Hey, I'm a really good multitasker." And the manager said, the manager's response was classic, and I'll never forget it. But the manager's response was, "I'm not. I get things done." I thought, wow, okay. The look on the employee's face was like, well, what do you mean? And so anyway, but there's some truth to that. A lot of people that think that their multitaskers aren't necessarily efficient. They might be working really fast, but they might be running around in circles getting nothing done. And so there is definitely an illusion to multitasking. Multitasking usually happens in a setting that lacks order or a plan of action. It is undirected energy being exercised randomly without a conscious workflow. Okay. Multitasking leads to multiple tasks being started but not finished. So an example would be, I've walked into stores and seen multiple products simultaneously sitting out of the cooler, but only one person working. You got a box of tomatoes over here. You got dough that's halfway being sheeted, and then you got something else going on the other prep table. And that's not a good thing when we have a bunch of things that are being done all at the same time. And we'll address that and why that's not good. Multitasking leads to making too many trips and taking too many steps and causing you to take extra time. It makes you have to stop and start on your tasks. So multitasking leads to amplification of anxiety for those around you. Others despise working in your mess. So this is a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer it, but have you ever worked in a place that was just kind of chaotic and the person is just running around in circles doing a bunch of things at once, and your anxiety just skyrockets? It's like, oh my goodness, I don't even know what to expect from this. And so multitasking really does kind of stem from chaos, typically, the lack of order or lack of a process. So it really is a problem. And I'm sure if you've worked in the restaurant industry long enough, you've seen a lot of people like that, or you may be one if you haven't noticed that as a problem. So let's talk about the solution here. So the solution to our multitasking problem. So the human brain can only truly concentrate on one task at a time, regardless if you think otherwise. Smarter people than myself have figured this out, psychologists. And so this isn't something, like I said, this isn't something for me. This is something that the educated world already knows, and they see what's going on. And really, it's kind of a thing that our brain works just one thing at a time, one thought at a time. And anytime we try to multitask, we have to stop one thought and start another thought. And then if we want to try to go back to the other one, we have to stop that thought and go back to the other one. And you find yourself stopping and starting over and over, and you lack an efficient flow from being able to think the same thought continuously. And so it's kind of like stop and go driving. Your car works much more efficiently. Your gas mileage is much better when you're driving on the interstate at one consistent speed, as opposed to in town, stopping and starting and stopping and starting. So there really is an efficiency factor in all of this. Focusing on a single task to completion is the key to production. Again, some of you might say, well, wait a minute. If I just did one thing at a time all the time, I'll never get anything done. Well, we'll get to that. That's the parallel tasking I was talking about. So single tasking, let's look at that. So do one task at a time and finish before moving on. Avoid jumping around from task to task due to distraction. So that's what I see a lot in our stores, that we're going to have some natural distractions no matter what. If you're working on a specific project in the back of the store, whether it's sheeting dough or chopping vegetables or whatever it is, and a customer comes in, that's going to be a natural disruption. You're going to have to stop what you're doing and go up front and help the customer make their pizza and so on and so forth, particularly if you're working by yourself. And so there's enough natural distractions that we really don't want to add more distractions by trying to do too many more things on top of being available for the customers. So if you're doing two things, trying to multitask on two different things, and the customer comes in, well, now you're multitasking between three different things, or you have to stop and go take care of the customers. And then if you got food sitting out from two other different tasks, it takes long. It's going to sit out longer and longer. And so it's really important that we reduce the number of projects going on, particularly in the back room, as much as we can, and reducing it down to just the number of people that you have at the most. Okay. There's this idea called pillaging that I like to teach about. And so I want you to all imagine, the Vikings, not the Minnesota Vikings, but like the Vikings of old, the ones with the ships and the ones that were, conquerors of different tribes and so on. So imagine you've got this tribe of Vikings that's got 1,000 soldiers. And then there's 10 other villages around, and all of those 10 other villages, they've got 100 soldiers in theirs. And so if the Vikings want to go overtake all of those other villages, they could divide and conquer. So they could send out 100 to every village to attack, and then it would be 100 on 100. It would be kind of a fair fight with every one of them. chances are, just law of average, they're going to lose approximately half their people, right? Because they're going to lose as many as they kill, because it's a fair fight all the way around. However, that's not how they typically would do this. The best way to do this would be to take all 1,000 soldiers and send them onto the first village, and it would be basically a 1,000 to 100 ratio, or a 10-to-1 ratio, and they would chew through this. They would pillage this first tribe and just chew through it and kill them quickly with very little casualties. And then they can move on to the next one and kill that tribe, and then the next one, kill that tribe. So they're killing one tribe at a time, moving on, and they're going to end up with as efficient as you possibly can, because they're doing one thing at a time. It's not so different, in the world of service either, or anything that's task oriented. If we focus on one thing and chew through it and pillage through it and attack it and get it done aggressively and then move on to the next one, we're going to be so much more efficient. So this whole divide and conquer idea really is, it's a really bad myth, dividing our attention and doing two different things. All right. So back to the parallel tasking. Parallel tasking would be using equipment as a partner, or it could be using another person. So, if you have another person, well, now you can do two things because you have two people. Okay, makes sense. Now you can kind of multitask because there's multi people, but each person isn't really multitasking. They're single tasking. Now, what if you have a piece of equipment instead of another person, like a Hobart? So now you got yourself, you're working by yourself, and you got a Hobart, which is almost like a person, because they can work, your Hobart can work independently as well. You can start dough, and then you can move on to other tasks, and you got 10 minutes to do some other things while your Hobart is working. And that's parallel tasking. Okay. Or you could fill up your sinks at the same time, or maybe your washing machine or your dryer is operating at the same time that you're doing other things. And that's parallel tasking. You could have several different pieces of equipment doing their own thing, and that's parallel tasking. But don't let that become multitasking. Okay. So you don't want to start using your tomato chopper and your Hobart and your sheeter all at the same time when you're the only one there. That's multitasking, and that's where it gets dangerous. So parallel tasking is not multitasking. It is different. Okay. Clean as you go. All right. This is a big one here. So if you're single tasking and you're pillaging and you're working through those things, and you complete the project, you complete the task, and you get it done, the temptation is just to move on to the next one, move on to the next task, and get it going, and hold off on the cleanup until you're all done. I've seen a lot of people just kind of take on the strategy of, well, we'll just do all this work, and then at the end of the shift, then we'll clean up. And that's a really bad way to think. So we do need to clean as we go. So it's easy to be short-sighted and overlook cleaning up after ourselves. It can seem like we're delaying important prep duties when we take the extra time to clean up before moving on. So there's a problem with perception here. We get impatient with something that we think is more important, like prepping stuff, and we think that cleaning up stuff after us is less important, so we put that off. The problem is if we do 10 different tasks and we put off the cleanup for all 10 tasks till the end, now we've got one really big mess at the end of the shift to take care of, and that's not productive at all. Have your dishes done, counters cleaned, equipment caught up before moving on. Example, don't let more than 4 totes pile up before you clean them. Clean your sheeter right away when you're finished. So these are all good thoughts. So when you're doing any task, whether you're chopping tomatoes or sheeting dough, whatever it is, you bring the product out, you engage in the work to get the project done, and then you clean up after yourself right after that. That means wiping down the equipment that you have, or cleaning the equipment. Maybe it's cleaning the sheeter blades. Maybe it's cleaning the the tomato chopper or the veggie chopper. Just get them all cleaned up before you move on to the next thing. And when you get into a habit of doing this, it'll just be so natural, and it won't feel like you're taking a shortcut. It'll feel like or I should say, it won't feel like you're taking the long way around and taking more time. It'll feel great when you get to the end of the day and you see how much quicker you got things done, and you don't have this big mess to clean up at the end. All right, so it's more efficient to work in a clean, sanitary environment than to work in clutter. So even apart from what we've already talked about, it's just better to work in a clean environment. Just there's not stuff laying around. You increase food safety that way too. The more you can keep things clean, of course, the less likely that we're gonna have a bad food product from bacteria, that type of thing. Another idea is everything has a home. Put utensils, dishes, or equipment in its assigned places. Don't just have things laying around somewhere, anywhere, kind of wherever feels right. Have certain places for everything and make sure everybody in the store knows where it's at. That will really save you a lot of time on looking for things, trying to figure out where something is. If you don't know where something is, and you have to look around for it, that's a lot of wasted time. But if you know exactly where something goes and you go right to that place, grab it, and move on, that really helps you stay efficient. When we're working in a clean, organized environment, we experience less anxiety and have a clearer mindset. This is really big. And I will say that, boy, I've run across this so much where employees leave because of the chaos. They don't know how to follow the person in charge, because the person in charge is kind of zipping around everywhere, doing different things out of order, and it's really hard to keep other people on the same page with you. If that's you, if you're the one working inefficiently, other people don't know how to keep with you. But if you stay organized and you start one project and finish it to completion, clean up after it, and they understand that, other people will do that right alongside of you, and there's no failure of expectations at that point. So piles of dishes and messes create a feeling of being behind and cause unnecessary stress. Chaos builds on itself. Messes multiply and tensions rise. And that's just true, guys. If you want to have a restaurant where we can keep stress as low as possible, remove all of the chaotic variables, remove all of the uncertainty, and include as much certainty into your restaurant as you can. The culture, the physical things, equipment, small wares, product. Remove as much uncertainty as you can and replace it with certainty, which is so we know what to expect. So those are all really important. All right. Hopefully this all makes a lot of sense. We'll have some discussion here in a few minutes as well, just so you guys can ask a lot of questions if you want, or we can talk about it, but let's keep going. So let's talk about the process. So you might be asking, okay, Joel, so this multitasking thing, I get it. We need to not multitask and we need to do things one at a time, but how do we do that? Because I'm so used to just kind of winging it. So how do I get out of the habit of winging it and, get onto a better habit of single tasking? And really, if you just try harder, if you just kind of do what you're normally doing the chaotic way and just kind of try to be less that way, you're going to fail because there's nothing to focus on that's positive. But if you focus on a process or something that is the central piece that's going to bring order to your day or to your shift, and you focus on that, then you can be successful, because then you're focusing on one thing instead of trying harder to focus on a whole bunch of things at once. So you just focus on one thing, and that is the process. And that's the hard part about this for some people. Some people just really find it hard to zoom in and focus because they're just thinking of a million things at once. They're big picture people, and they're thinking of a whole bunch of different things, but they can't zoom into one thing, and they can't figure out what one thing to zoom into. Well, the good thing about a process is a process takes a bunch of different tasks and puts them together into one process to focus on. And so when you focus on that one process, then the steps are just part of that process and it comes naturally. It's kind of like, I've had managers that would say, how do I focus on cleaning all of these different parts of the store? I think of all of these different parts of the store and how to get them clean. I don't even know where to start. Well, it's true. If you're thinking of all of the different parts of your store, and how to get, that part of your store clean, and you're trying to do it all at once, you could jump around, try to clean one thing and start cleaning another. Then you realize I want to clean something else. And oh, what about this? And what about that? But if you just have a system or a process in place, maybe a cleaning chart that divides it up into days, or maybe a zone chart that divides your store up into different zones, or maybe if the process is dividing it up in by people, and so you assign different people different tasks. Whatever it is, if you put a process in place, it gives you one central thing to focus on that can get you through it. Okay, and so I want to talk to you just about a general process here for single tasking, ways to get things done that hopefully can make sense. And I got a couple different visual aids for you that can help. So the first thing is and this is really the biggest one: commit to the process. Okay, commit to the process. See, if you don't commit to the process to begin with, then it doesn't matter. You're never going to do it. You're going to continue doing what you're doing. And just to give you an example, our Red Book is a good example of a process. The whole Red Book is a process. It's one big process, but it also has a bunch of smaller processes in it. One side of a page is all about the morning shift. The other side of the page is all about the night shift. It tells you how to prioritize your tasks. It tells you the step-by-step what to do. And rather than trying to focus on all of those different things that need to be done during the course of the day or the evening, you just focus on the process. You focus on that page and you work through those things systematically. And it's amazing how much faster things will be and how much more organized things will be and how things will be prioritized better than if you're trying to tackle a whole bunch of things at one time. So the first thing is to commit to the process. And until you commit to the process, try harder doesn't work. Okay, so commit to the process, whatever that process is. If you don't have a process for something, then you need to create one or ask somebody to create one for you. But don't just keep working in chaos. So commit to the process. That's the first step. So if you see this little wheel on the right there, that's kind of at the top there. The second part of this step then, or this process, is isolate the task. And here's what I mean by that. So you committed to the process. Now isolate the task. You're looking on the Red Book and you are at the place where you're doing your admin stuff. Okay, so focus on your admin stuff. Isolate the admin stuff in your mind. Focus on that. Zoom in. Focus on it, and don't get distracted from that. So you commit to the process, and then you isolate to the task. The next thing is you attack the task, and it goes back to the pillaging, right? Whatever you do it quickly and attack it and get it done as fast as you can. Work at it fast. Now, I'm not saying be sloppy and miss accuracy. I'm not saying that. I'm saying be accurate and be diligent, but get it done as fast as you can by focusing on it, and don't let yourself get distracted. That's what the attack part is. I don't mean just focus on it and take your time. And whenever you take your time and you're not attacking something, you're leaving your mind open to wander into something else. When you're really focused, your mind doesn't wander. You stay focused, okay? So isolate, then attack. Then the next thing is complete the task. This means finish it. Don't stop before you're finished and move on to the next thing. Finish it, complete the job, get there. Set your sights on the finish line. Don't set your sights most of the way there and think, okay, this is good enough. I'm going to start something else now. I'll come back to this later. No, finish it, get it done and finish it. And then, of course, so once you've finished with the product, whatever it is that you're doing, then clean up after yourself. Wipe it down. Wipe down the machinery from top to bottom, all of it. Wash the dishes for it and get it all put away. Clean up, and then you move on. Okay, this is the cycle, and you need to do this. This is what people are missing. Okay, when you do that and you think that way, and you watch people that operate this way, they're like machines. They just get into it and they just pillage. They just chew their way through a task and they move on to the next one. They chew their way through it and they're like a machine. And if the opposite of that is people that really try to multitask, they're doing a bunch of things at once and they're just not really accomplishing anything, because at the end of the day, you got a whole bunch of things that are started but not completed, and you got a big mess to clean up after yourself too. So this is really important. Just another chart that can kind of give you another visual aid here if this chart works better for you. But so part of the process is, so you take your first task number one. Maybe this is your A items on your prep list. You isolate it, so you focus on this one thing, whatever it is. Maybe it's making cheesy bread, and then you attack it, get aggressive, complete it, clean up, and then you move on to task number 2, and then you go through the same process with that task, and then move on to task number 3. And if you can get into this habit of really working through this, you will be far ahead of most people. Most people don't do this very well without learning it. So anyway, so I hope this is good for you guys. I hope this has struck a chord. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up for you guys, and I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. So